Hi everybody, I'm back with a bit of a kitchen lab addendum video. If you've watched my developing videos, you've noticed that there's a significant section that has to be done in a dark bag or in a dark space, in a dark room, in my case, a closet or a bathroom. And that part is taking the roll of film from what it looks like when it comes out of your camera to loading it onto a reel into the developing tank. When you expose your images onto your film, if you re-expose that film to light by removing it from the canister, you're going to erase your images. You're going to damage your images with all that exposure to light. So it's really important that it be a pitch black space that you do this in. At night, if I close the door to the closet inside my bedroom or to my bathroom and close curtains and everything, I can get it pretty pitch black, but dark isn't enough. It really has to be very, very, as close to pitch black as you can get a space to be. And that's why I use my dark bag, because it allows me to load my film in whatever kind of light I'm in. If I'm in the kitchen and I don't want to have to go to the room, or if your home just doesn't have a room that can get that dark, then a dark bag is a way to go. Unfortunately, what that means is that my developing videos are missing a key piece of information, which is how do you get the roll of film from a canister or from a 120 spool into the developing tank completely in the dark. So I thought I'd make a video of how this happens. So you should know that I'm sacrificing some rolls of film. I won't be able to use this film because I'm going to expose it to light to do this video. And everything I do here has to be done in the dark. You may want to sacrifice a couple of rolls to practice with because it is a little bit tricky. But please keep in mind, everything here has to get done in the dark if you're hoping to get any images out of this film. So to start, I just want to show you that I actually have a combination of equipment I've accumulated over the years. So there's two types, the most popular types of developing tanks that are used. We call them, for obvious reasons, steel or metal, and plastic. This is specifically a Patterson tank, that's the brand, and it uses its own parts, its own spools. You really can't mix and match. Similar with the steel, although I think these are more of a standard now, so you can mix and match brands. Now, the plastic reels are easier to load onto. It uses a ratchet system. And it loads from the outside in, so it starts on the outside and moves its way to the inside. With the steel, you have to do all the turning to get this loaded in, and it starts from the inside, so you have to get it in there. So to begin, I'm going to show you the transport of 35mm film through the camera. This is my favorite 35mm camera, my Olympus OM4. When you load a roll of film into a 35mm camera, you may have noticed that the dull side is always the side that is facing the shutter, meaning this is the side that gets exposed. This side is called the emulsion side. This is where the silver is. This is what is sensitive to light and will expose and create your image. This back shiny side is actually just like almost like a plastic liner to hold the emulsion in place. So I'm going to load up this roll of film. I have to bend a little notch into here. So regardless of the type of camera that you have, as you take the pictures, what's happening generally is after every picture gets taken, the film is being transported out of the canister onto this other kind of spool on this side of the camera until you've shot through all 36 or 24 exposures and there's no more film left to pull. Now, this is a completely manual camera, so after I shoot, I have to wind the frame myself to move the film over for the next frame. Some cameras have a motor on this side, so as soon as you press the picture, it just pulls the film for you. I will say there are a handful of cameras, I think my EOS 3 is one of them, that when I load the film, it actually pulls it all out onto this spool, and then as I shoot, it actually winds back into the canister. But that's more of a rare case. Most of the time, as you're shooting, you're pulling film out of the canister into the camera. Now let's say we get all the way through, we've shot all this film, and now all the film is on this side. Then with this style camera, we look for the rewind button. On my camera, it's on top. It's this little R button here, so I'm going to press that. Sometimes it's on the bottom. What that does is it releases it from here so that you can start using your rewind lever. Let me hold this in place to pull the film back. And now what's happening is you're rewinding it back into the canister. Again, if you have a more advanced or a newer camera that has automatic winding, it will probably get to the end of the roll and then just pop it right back very quickly. You'll hear the motor going for a few seconds, and then before you know it, all your film is back in the canister. Now, if you are shooting with this kind of camera, something you want to get in the habit of doing is leaving a piece of film outside the canister. And the way you do that is as you rewind, you listen for the sound of the film being released from here, and it's just a very faint click. But two things happen. You hear that little click, you also feel a reduction in the tension of the rewind lever that I'm spinning up here. What you want to do, that's the click you're hearing for, and you want to stop there. You don't want to keep rewinding, because if you can, you want to be able to rewind your film leaving this out. This is called the leader. You want a piece of the leader still sticking out of the camera. It'll make the next step really easy. Now, some other cameras, especially the automatic ones, point and shoot cameras, they're going to wind this all the way back in to where you can't see this anymore. I'm going to push this back in. And it'll look like that when you're done. So you have two options. You're either going to have the film all the way back in the canister like this, or you're going to have the leader sticking out. Now, one thing I've done here a little prematurely is I cut the leader to give myself a nice smooth surface here. So that's your first step if you have the film sticking out of the canister. All I did was take some scissors and cut a nice straight edge here. Now this is the one that's rewound all the way in. So let's pretend this came out of an automated camera that just rewound everything back into the canister. So this is the point at which we go into the dark bag. And what we're going to do here is we're going to load it onto a plastic reel. So I'll get the reel ready. Okay. So, for the one that has the leader sticking out, there's a couple ways of loading this onto the plastic reel. First of all, I want to show you that the reel does have, there it is, a very obvious kind of entrance. It's got notches for you to feel them in the dark. But ideally you want to kind of set them up so you know where they are before you go into the dark bag. So the first thing I do is I pull just a little bit of film out of the canister. I hold it with just a slight angle here and thread it into the openings on the canister. Now, once it gets past the ball bearings, which you'll be able to see, you can start ratcheting this on and just pull the canister back. a little at a time. What this does is it actually keeps me from touching the film. The film is going straight from the canister onto the reel. Or onto the spool. And it's not giving me a chance to scratch it or to damage it in any way. If you're using a metal reel, you can do the same thing. You can leave it in the canister and just pull a little bit at a time as you go. And eventually you'll get to a point where you can't pull anymore. So you are at the end of the roll. Be careful because you're doing this in the dark. So what I do to cut it in the dark is I actually just rest the scissors against the opening on the cartridge to give this a clean cut. Now I'm not going to cut it yet because I want to show you what happens if you don't pull it straight out of the canister. All right, I'm just rewinding this back into the canister so we can start off back where we started. Now, instead of loading it directly out of the canister, what you're going to have to do is very gently, and again, you have to do this in the dark, is pull it out of the canister and try to roll it up like this without scratching it, without damaging it, oops, without that happening. Now, if you do have to handle it, this is why it's good to know that the shiny side it's fine, it's plastic. This is the emulsion side. Now, you don't want scratches anywhere, but you'd prefer to have scratches on the plastic than on the emulsion. The other thing that can happen if you use a dark bag is your hands will start to get sweaty and your hand will start to stick to the film. It's another thing you want to avoid. So again, instead of rolling it directly onto the reel, I just made a little roll of it in my hand, and I got to the end. And because you do this in the dark, you just want to feel for that edge and cut it. So now you've got an empty canister and the film has been liberated from it. Now, ideally, you want to have a clean edge on this side too, but that's really hard to do because you're cutting in the dark. I've tried to give it some other slices, to try to get it straight. It's really hard to do. So you may find it easier to actually roll it back the other way so that the side that you're starting with, when you start rolling it onto the spool, is the nice clean edge you started off with. So if we're using plastic, again, we just feel for the entrance notches. Feel for it to get past the ball bearings. And we just start ratcheting. Eventually the film will be completely wrapped around here. And you'll be done. Now I want to show you with the same film. Let me just get it back rolled up the way we started. So this is the same roll of film. Except this time I'm going to put it on a steel reel. So for this, you kind of want to hold the roll in the palm of your hand back here so that you can get these two fingers to hold the film with just that slight little bend in it. Now also with this, you have to feel for the direction that the film has to spool onto here. to make sure you're going the right way. And inside of here is actually just a little clip. You just have to feed the film in between these two metal pieces. Again, it's tricky to do in the dark, so you might want to sacrifice a roll to do this. But what you're doing is pinching the film to make it fit into here. Let me try to show you all angles. And just using that clip to feed it in. And so now the film is attached. See, I can actually let go of the reel. The film is firmly attached to that metal clip. Now I'm not letting up this pinch, because if I do, I'm going to start skipping rings here. And knowing what direction it's supposed to turn, maintaining that curl to the film. Oops. You just start gently turning the reel. And then, because you can't bring this out in the light, sometimes you can feel with your fingernail whether there's a piece of film in each of these holes. If it hasn't been loaded correctly, you'll have two pieces of film through one rung. So you want to try to feel for that. And when you're done, your film should feel nice and even, not going askew. And it should be at or near the very end. That's how you'll know it's loaded correctly. So we've loaded the same roll onto both plastic and metal reels now. The other situation we might have is a roll of film that was used in maybe a point and shoot camera or a more automatic camera that rewound it all the way back into the canister. So for this, what we need to do is get the film out of here. One way is to use some kind of a can opener, like this end. The top side is the one that has the little nub on it. The bottom side is what you want to preferably use. And you have to get some good leverage on here. It's easier to do with the can openers that are the ones that are pointy on one end. Let me see if it works better on here. Yeah, I don't have one with good leverage. I didn't realize I didn't own one of those pointy ones until I tried to make this video. So anyway, you use a can opener to pop this, because if you feel this, it's just a metal cap. The other thing you can do, which I've done plenty of times in a pinch, is try to just muscle your fingers into the opening that the film comes out of. And you should be able to eventually peel it open enough to feel for the leader of the film. So now you'll have to do this in the dark, but you still want to cut as straight a line as possible there on that end. And now you can proceed with loading either straight from the canister or pulling it all the way out. Until you feel that end, and use the canister as your guide to try to give it as straight a cut here as possible. So the end that's attached to the inside of the canister is going to be very tightly curly and a little bit harder to load. That one went past the ball bearings a lot easier. And now, whoops, we want to prevent that. What I do is I usually just put my pinky in there. And with this one, all we have to do is ratchet. And there we go. So with this one, it's a lot easier to get it on there. You're just ratcheting these two halves and it loads it from the outside in, whereas this one we loaded from the inside out. So there we go, two different ways of loading two different types of reels. Now, if you also shoot 120 like I do, I'm gonna go through the same process with this. If you have the Patterson plastic reels, the same reels that can develop 35 millimeter can actually be pulled apart and reset. Oops. They can be reset wider apart for 120. For the metal, you do have to have a completely different reel. Now, I'll go through the loading process with this as well and show you how it goes through the back. This is my Hasselblad back. Okay, so when we load the film, and this is specific to Hasselblad, other cameras, other 120 cameras actually load and use the film almost like a 35 millimeter does. But Hasselblad's a little bit different. So we tuck the leader of the backing paper onto this other side till we get that. And then at this point we would load it back into the back and put it on the camera. So what happens here is, again, we've got the spool that has the film on it and an empty spool. And as we take pictures, let's see, the film gets wound off of one onto the other. Now, this is just a backing paper, and you'll see the film is stuck to it. There it is. So that's a piece of tape holding the film onto the backing paper. Obviously, this is the emulsion side. So when this is loaded into the back, this is where the film gets exposed through the camera. So we're going to finish moving the entire roll of film from one spool to the other. Because unlike 35, where it rolls out of the canister and then back in, 120 gets loaded from one spool onto the other, and then that's it. You start from there with the developing process. So let's pretend we're taking pictures and winding, clicking, winding, clicking, winding. And we're done. Almost. There we go. So then when we take it out of the camera when we're done, what we usually have to do is fold this over, and then it'll come with a piece of paper that we just moisten and stick down. And this will usually say exposed on it, so that we know that this has now been exposed. So we're taking the exposed film into the dark bag. So in the dark bag, we want to position the opening of this in such a way that we can locate it in the dark. And this is, again, this is all happening in the dark. You want to feel for the edge where the paper's been folded over and peel back the paper. And then what you'll do is you're actually going to find, there it is, you're going to feel for where the tape and the film separate. What you want is the film, not the backing paper. So we're going to start gently rolling the film away from the backing paper. Again, I'm handling it on the side that is the plastic side, not the emulsion side, but I still have to be very careful not to have wet hands that are going to stick to it. Ideally, maybe I should be holding it just from the edges. And then we eventually get to the part where the film is attached to the backing paper. Oops. Now what I typically try to do is peel this back. And instead of trying to get this off of the film, because what will happen is I'll accidentally try to start putting folds in my film, is I actually try to just fold it back so that it just looks like this. Remember to hang on to the spool. You can toss the rest. But we're still in our dark bag. So now, just like the film, we're going to hold it in our palm, put that little bit of a fold into it like this. Feel for the entrance. Pull it past the ball bearings. And then we just ratchet again. And now our film is completely loaded onto the plastic reel. I'll do the same thing with the steel. So again, when you're done pulling it off the backing paper, you have the tape side. Holding it in your palm with a little bit of a fold. Just like the 35mm one, there's an entrance, there's a direction it has to go. But this time again, we're also loading it from the middle. We're trying to attach it into this clip. Again, doing this completely in the dark. So the film is in this clip. And without letting up this little fold, we start to slowly turn. And there we go. The next step in the dark bag, you have to make sure, if you're using the plastic ones, there's a post that goes through here before it goes into the tank. With these, there isn't. You just put it directly into the tank. But please put the lid back on it securely before you can then open up your dark bag and start developing. But this is, if you sacrifice some film in order to try this, this is what it should look like when you're done. And then the trick is just doing it in the dark. With 35, just be careful using scissors in a dark bag. That is the tricky part. I've had a couple close calls where I felt my finger was against the blade of the of the scissors, but with a little bit of practice, this does get easier. Please let me know if you have any questions. If you run into any trouble in your dark bag, roll up your film, put it in the tank, put the lid on, take a break, take a breather, start over. If something is just not working right and you have to put your film into the tank with the lid on it just for a while, bring your reels out if you can, and just make sure that that maybe, especially these that are adjustable, make sure it didn't get attached wrong, make sure it didn't get attached at the wrong distance. With steel, if they take a fall, it's possible to bend them in such a way that these are not quite parallel. If there's any kind of dent or if one of these sides is askew, the film won't load correctly. So if you're having trouble, it might not be your fault. It might actually be the equipment is faulty. But don't despair. You can always, find a dark container to, put it in your tank with the lid on, put your film in there, and try again later. I can also tell you, as a person with years and years of working in a lab, you would not be the first person to walk into a lab saying, help, there's a roll of film in there that I pulled out of the canister and I can't get it onto the reel. And any pro lab, I know Sammy's for sure can, but most pro labs should be able to help you out and develop your film for you. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.